October 18th, 2025. Well, this will be the day that we're going to have the so-called No Kings rallies across the country by all the leftists, or we might call it the No Brains Rally. At any rate, you've got all the leftist groups that are out there are all organizing. You got your ACLU, the American Federation of Teachers, and all these other groups, the U.S. Communist Party, and Antifa, and whatever. They're all going to go out and rally against this proposed, purported theory that somehow President Trump is somehow a king, which is really weird because today a king has no real power, really. A king is a ceremonial figure in today's world. Maybe a dictator is what they're really trying to say, but that's obviously not true either. This is a complete lie. President Trump won the popular vote and the electoral vote the electoral vote particularly by a wide margin, the popular vote by a respectable margin by today's standards of a polarized country, and perhaps the current technology of micro-targeting voters. At any rate, but I guess they're going to go out and we'll see whether this turns into a lot of rioting or whether it's just a bunch of goofball protesting. It makes no real sense at all, but at any rate, they're opposed to the Trump policies, and we'll have to see, where that goes to. Some people think that the shutdown had to continue till this occurred because otherwise the members of the Senate would face the wrath of all these people if they were in town in D.C. that day and they had already voted to reopen the government. And that maybe after this is over with, perhaps we can actually then get the government back open again. And we'll see. Of course, everybody denies this because what are they going to do? Say it's true? I mean, So anyhow, that's the big event here, and we'll have to see how that plays out. And on to everything. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Thanks for all the support I've got. And you also can follow me on Rumble. Also, then I want to I guess the next big development here is kind of a follow-up to the last video, which not enough people watched, I think. I was discussing this issue of the whole plan that was claimed that we're going to provide Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine to attack targets deep inside of Russia. Well, Zelensky came as expected, and no Tomahawks. Apparently, what appears to happen is that there's a mixture. The Hungarian President Orban somehow got involved, and somehow a phone call occurred between Putin and Trump, which lasted something like 2.5 hours. I don't think they were necessarily talking the whole time, but I mean, they may have taken a break at some point because Trump did make a social media post during the middle of it. It's hard to know what's going on here from a certain point of view. Is Putin the one that's really asking for this conversation? Is Trump the one asking for the conversation? Is it purely instigated by Orban himself, who's probably has the best relations with the Russians of anybody in the European Union on the one hand, and on the other hand, he can still have reasonably good relations with the U.S. I think on many issues, Orban is actually in a lot of ways closer to Trump than many of the people in Europe are actually, but such as on immigration and so forth. But at any rate, somehow or other, this happened, and we don't know whether the threat of Tomahawks led to this from the point of view of as a Russian cave, or is it self-deterrence on the part of Trump saying, do I really want to do this? What might this lead to? I mean, I want the Peace Prize. I don't want to be the guy that sets off World War III. So we don't know. Either is possible, in which case there probably won't be a Peace Prize because Stockholm probably won't exist anymore. Well, at any rate, if World War III happened, So, but at any rate, they got together, and apparently Trump was sufficiently impressed that Putin was interested in ending the war, which of course he's interested in ending the war on his terms. And Zelensky's interested in ending the war on his terms. I mean, Putin's terms are a bit more reasonable than Zelensky's from one point of view. That is to say, they're more achievable, I think, in principle. That is, he would like to basically get Ukraine to change its anti-Russia policies and not join NATO, and remove all the restrictions on the Russian language, the Russian Orthodox Church, and so forth, you know, that have been imposed by the Zelensky government and its predecessors up after 2014. And I suspect certain territories as well, which have been defined, and certain conditions about security, which in Putin's viewpoint is reduction in Ukrainian armed forces, and in Zelensky's terms is guarantees by major countries like the U.S. and European nations that they will go to war with Russia if they resume the conflict. And so that's kind of the layout of what the dispute is. But I don't think there's, but the idea that each of them just want the carnage to continue for itself, I don't think either of them wants that. So, at any rate, so that we'll see what happens here. It looks like the next stage is that apparently Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Rubio will be leading a delegation to meet with Russians to try to work out some terms, I guess, and also with Ukrainians. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of unclear because to me the real problem is basically with Ukraine. I think, really, I mean, the only thing that Ukraine has said they'd agree to a ceasefire in place as a temporary measure, basically in order for them to rearm and regroup. I think mainly because they're kind of on the losing side. On the other hand, we'll have to see, exactly how that plays out in terms of, the problem is right now to simply stop where we are right now. Okay, so you have Potrovsk, for instance, is kind of semi-encircled, but not totally encircled. Russian troops are in the city. Ukrainian troops are in the city. There's a penetration into Ukrainian territory to the north of the city, which has been under attack, but it's somewhat precarious position. If you see what I mean, it's not like it's a stable, and there's other places all along the front that are somewhat similar. Some are more potentially stable than others, but to actually come up with a ceasefire in place and have it hold, I would think that'd just be a recipe for it breaking down and everybody getting angry again, but we'll see. At any rate, I mean, because somebody will take a shot at somebody, and then, it reminds me a lot of the way some of the big Arab-Israeli wars of the past kind of ended up with, kind of temporary ceasefires and awkward positions with a lot of, at any rate, so that's the situation. And also Trump is saying that he's realizing, I guess, looking at his inventory of Tomahawks and the rate at which we're producing replacements and kind of going, how many of these do we really want to have to give away to really have a difference? So we could give a few, of course, they could hit a few targets, but it wouldn't really change a lot. Or we could give a lot and it might have a big impact, but it might escalate to a bigger war. And also, we wouldn't have the Tomahawks for, let's say, a scenario with the Chinese, for instance, or whatever. So I think that has a lot to play in it. We'll see what happens on these negotiations. Yeah. At any rate, I would say that it looks to me like also to some degree that Putin as advisors, I guess you'd say, have done a lot of psychological studies of Trump and have probably figured out the right things to say to kind of entice him into an interest. Like, for instance, this tunnel between Russia and Alaska, which to me sounds economically nonsense. But I mean, how many people are really going to be going from Siberia to Alaska or vice versa? I mean, it doesn't look to me like a major trade route, really. I guess in principle it could become something, but I mean, you could have trade going. Well, at any rate, I don't think that's going to happen. But being a builder type person, Trump would probably find the idea initially enticing, such as looking at the waterfront potential developments that could occur in Gaza, for instance. But anyhow, so that's kind of the situation. We'll have to see how that plays out. One can hope this thing doesn't escalate, but at least we've averted it for a couple of weeks, I guess, and then but will the meeting actually occur? one of the questions was, how can get Putin to the table? And here I'm not talking about agreeing to meet. I'm agreeing, how does he physically get to Hungary? I mean, he isn't going to go through Ukraine, the shortest direct distance, I don't think. So he could go through Belarus and then try to skirt those really narrow international waters between Finland and what is that? Which one is that? Estonia, is it? Anyway, where the airplanes violated the airspace, and then try to come down through there. But then what are you going to do? Go through Poland, or you're going to go through the south? Go through Turkey, and then over through Romania or Bulgaria and north. I mean, so it is an interesting question. We'll have to see how that works out. I mean, one thought occurred to me is I guess Trump could send Air Force One and fly them in there, and I doubt any of these people would actually shoot on Air Force One, right? I mean, so maybe that's the way you could do it, fly in an American aircraft. I don't know. Or I guess he could be escorted by U.S. fighter planes. I don't know. This will be very interesting to see. Probably nobody will do anything that radical, but they do have that international court that has this indictment out because of the children that somehow were picked up on the battlefields and taken to Russia, and which many of whom I presume were either orphaned or at least separated from parents and because of the war. But at any rate, they're trying to turn this into a, quote, kidnapping, which, I mean, what do you do? But at any rate, it's a normal propaganda line. In World War I, the big British propaganda line was they had babies on the end of German bayonets. That never happened in reality, but it's war propaganda. And, everybody needs to be very worried about claims of Russian attacks on civilian targets. And I'm reading this Representative Bacon guy's comments. I'm not responding to it. They're not really doing that. Now, to some degree, if you take a hospital and turn it into a military command center, yeah, they probably bomb the hospital, but that's a violation of international law to do that. I mean, that is to put a military center in a hospital. I mean, this is the kind of thing that Hamas did in Gaza. So, at any rate, well, that's that situation. We'll hope it works out for the best. Let's hope that the no brains rallies don't turn into a riot. But if you have Antifas involved, I don't know. There's a lot of pretty crazy people out there right now, very mentally disturbed at times. So, at any rate, I'll be wrapping this up for this time, and be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always. And the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. All for now.